Hey guys, Luke here. What you're about to listen is going to be really, really funny. And I tried to keep the 40k lore to, minimum. Uh, but this story is what happens if another empire would say attack Earth. Uh, well, you'll see. Just listen to it. And if you guys like it, just, like, share, and subscribe if you want. But I'm pretty sure you're going to like it. Anyways, thanks for watching. Have a good one.
The message arrived like a cosmic slap to the face, cutting through the usual hum of galactic background radiation with an almost physical presence. It wasn't subtle, nor was it particularly polite. To the inhabitants of Sol 3, designated Earth, we are the Galactic Empire, and you have been classified as a primitive species requiring integration. You have 30 Earth Standard days to declare your unconditional surrender and submission to Imperial authority. Failure to comply will result in extermination or enslavement, as deemed necessary for the greater peace of the Empire. A holographic projection of a stern, four-eyed alien with too many chin folds shimmered in the Oval Office, his declaration echoing in the stunned silence. President Aris Thorne, a woman whose calm demeanor was legendary, merely raised an eyebrow. Her chief of staff, Marcus Vance, a man whose gray hair seemed to have multiplied exponentially in the last 5 minutes, clutched his data slate like a lifeline. 30 days, huh? President Thorne murmured, her voice a low, melodic contralto that always seemed to cut through tension. She then gestured to Marcus. Get me Admiral Ravens, and make sure the coffee machine in the Situation Room is fully stocked. This could be a long one. That's where I came in. Fleet Admiral Luke Ravens. I was in my office, a comfortable space overlooking the orbital shipyards, trying to coax a particularly stubborn AI into calculating optimal fleet deployments for a theoretical rogue black hole scenario. The problem with superintelligent AIs is they tend to overthink things. The priority ping came through, a shrill, insistent tone that always meant not a drill. I took one last sip of my lukewarm coffee, left a passive-aggressive note for the AI about its lack of imaginative solutions, and headed to the Situation Room. The room was tense, a stark contrast to the usual controlled chaos. Monitors glowed with astronomical data, tactical projections, and speculative threat assessments. Scientists, strategists, and analysts huddled over displays, their faces etched with a mixture of disbelief and grim determination. The holographic projection of Admiral Zyler, the smug Imperial envoy, still hung in the air, a constant reminder of the audacity we were facing. Admiral, President Thorne said, her voice betraying not a hint of panic, meet our new neighbors, there. Enthusiastic, and apparently not very good at intelligence gathering. I leaned over the central holographic display, which now showed the projected trajectory of the Empire's scout fleet, a paltry collection of vessels, utterly incapable of detecting the true scope of Earth's defense capabilities. Enthusiastic and apparently blind. They can't possibly have detected our actual capabilities, Madam President. If they had, they wouldn't be here. Or they'd be here with a much, much larger fleet and a far more polite introduction. Our actual capabilities were a well-kept secret, hidden behind layers of technological obfuscation that made even our own deep space probes look like glorified tin cans. We'd been watching the galaxy for centuries, observing, learning, and quietly advancing, beyond anything the Empire could comprehend. We didn't want to be noticed. We just wanted to be left alone with our memes, our increasingly efficient fusion reactors, and our ongoing debate about whether pineapple belonged on pizza. Galactic conquest was low on our priority list, right after dealing with that stubborn AI in my office. Indeed, Thorne agreed, a faint smile playing on her lips. So, Admiral, any thoughts on how we respond to such gracious invitation? I steepled my fingers, a familiar grin spreading across my face. It was the kind of grin that usually meant someone somewhere was about to have a very bad day. Well, Madam President, I have an idea. It's a bit Unconventional, but I think it sends a clear message about who they're really dealing with. Unconventional is good, Thorne said, a glint in her eye. Surprise is often the best weapon against arrogance. 30 days later, the Empire's flagship, the Imperious Vengeance, received a data burst from Sol 3. Admiral Xyler, a being whose entire existence was dedicated to order and efficient conquest, was overseeing the final preparations for the invasion. He expected a desperate plea for mercy, perhaps a last-minute attempt at negotiation, or even a pitiful offer of tribute. What he received was entirely different. The data burst contained, in its entirety, the Warhammer 40,000 lore library. Every novel, every codex, every obscure piece of background material, meticulously translated into Galactic Common. It was accompanied by a single, succinct message. This was us. We can go back. Do you wish to proceed? Xyler spent the next 3 days in his personal chambers, poring over the data. His advisors found him pale and trembling, his 4 eyes wide with a mixture of horror and grudging admiration. He saw tales of empires that dwarfed their own, of gods of chaos and order, of genocidal wars fought on scales he couldn't even fathom. He saw space marines, custodes, orcs, eldar, tyranids. He saw a universe of unending, brutal conflict where humanity was not merely a participant, but often the very source of the greatest terrors. He saw a galaxy where planets were routinely wiped clean of life, where billions perished daily, and where the concept of peace was a forgotten dream. They depict a universe of unending war, Xyler stammered to his second-in-command, a stern female officer named Jaynara. They call this their history, their fiction. They suggest they might return to it. Jaynara, ever the pragmatist, scoffed, her 4 eyes narrowing. A primitive psychological ploy, Admiral. They seek to intimidate us with fantastical tales. Their scout data shows no such capabilities. Their planetary defense grids are negligible, their orbital platforms rudimentary at best. This is a desperate bluff. Xyler, however, was no fool. The sheer volume and detail of the fiction was disturbing. No primitive species could conjure such intricate barbarity, such a vast and consistent tapestry of apocalyptic warfare. The sheer dedication to documenting such horrors was unnerving, but his orders were clear, and the Empire's honor was on the line. He couldn't back down. Imperial doctrine dictated swift, decisive action against insolent primitives. "Prepare the fleet," Xyler commanded, his voice regaining a semblance of its usual authority, though a flicker of unease remained in his eyes. "We proceed as planned. They will learn the true meaning of Imperial might, and if these space marines exist, they will learn the true meaning of Imperial laser fire." He tried to sound confident, but the tremor in his voice betrayed him. And so they attacked. The initial Imperial fleet was impressive for them. A veritable swarm of cruisers, destroyers, and troop transports, bristling with energy weapons and torpedo launchers. They expected to encounter a rudimentary defense grid, perhaps a few token orbital platforms, and a desperate but ultimately futile resistance. Their intelligence suggested a planetary population ripe for subjugation, technologically advanced enough to be useful, but not enough to be a threat. What they met was me, or rather my fleet. "All right, boys and girls," I announced over the comms, a wide grin on my face as I watched the Imperial fleet advance on the main screen of the Spirit of Vengeance, my flagship. "Looks like they didn't get the memo, or they just really like a good punch-up. Either way, they're about to get one. Let's show these overgrown salamanders what happens when you disturb a human's nap." My bridge crew, a mix of hardened veterans and eager young officers, responded with a chorus of cheers and the occasional wolf whistle. Commander Elise Vance, my tactical officer, a woman whose calm demeanor masked a fiery passion for kinetic impactors, adjusted her comms implant with a faint smile. Lieutenant Jax, our head of astrogation, cracked his knuckles, already plotting interception vectors. We'd been itching for this. For centuries, we'd maintained the illusion of technological inferiority, observing the galactic stage with a detached amusement. Now, it was showtime. "Target leading elements," I ordered, my voice calm but with an underlying current of excitement. "Let's introduce them to the first lesson of Imperial deterrence, overwhelming firepower, and tell the Emperor's Fist battery to warm up. I want them to feel that one." The void around Earth suddenly shimmered, and what the Imperial sensors had registered as a few inconsequential asteroid fields and nebulae resolved into something far more menacing. Dozens, then hundreds of colossal starships materialized, their hulls a sleek, predatory black, punctuated by the glowing muzzles of weapons that had no business being on any known warship. These weren't just big ships, they were mean ships, designed for one purpose: to erase anything that stood in their way. "Admiral," yelled an Imperial sensor officer, his voice cracking with disbelief. "New contacts, there. They're emerging from hyperspace pockets within the system, and their energy signatures, they're off the charts. Our readouts are collapsing." Zyler stared at the tactical display, his multiple eyes widening in horror. The primitive species had pulled a fleet out of thin air, a fleet that dwarfed his own in both size and sheer destructive potential. And they weren't just emerging, they were teleporting into optimal firing positions, executing jump calculations that should have been impossible for any known FTL drive. The sheer audacity of it, the technological superiority, was a cold splash of reality. "Open fire," he shrieked, his composure completely shattered, his four eyes darting wildly. "All available weapons, concentrate fire on the largest targets. They cannot have this many ships. It must be an illusion." It was no illusion. It was too late. The human fleet didn't bother with warning shots. The void erupted in a symphony of destruction. Beams of raw, concentrated energy, vibrant streaks of emerald and sapphire, lanced out from our ships, tearing through Imperial shielding like tissue paper and carving gaping chasms in their hulls. Macro cannons, far larger than anything the Imperials possessed, bellowed their defiance, launching projectiles the size of small asteroids that detonated with cataclysmic force. These macro shells, propelled by localized gravimetric drives, hit with the force of small suns. My ship, the Spirit of Vengeance, was a behemoth, a mile-long spearhead of pure aggression. Its main weapon, the God Hammer Lance, a marvel of directed energy physics, unleashed a focused beam of antimatter that vaporized the lead Imperial cruiser, the steadfast resolve, in a flash of incandescent light, leaving behind only a rapidly expanding cloud of superheated plasma. "Heh, steadfast indeed," I chuckled, watching the tactical display. "All right, next up, target the command vessel. Let's make sure our new friend Zyler gets the message personally, and tell the Hellfire battery to prep for spread shot. I want them to feel like they're flying through a really bad day in a stellar nursery." The Imperious Vengeance was a formidable ship, but it was like a fishing trawler going up against a supercarrier. Our ships weren't just bigger, they were faster, better shielded, and packed a punch that made the theoretical Warhammer 40K ships look quaint. We'd been playing around with plasma, melta, and even cyclonic torpedo technology for centuries. Our void shields weren't just energy fields, they were localized spacetime distortions, shunting incoming energy and matter into pockets of subspace. Imperial energy weapons, meant to disable and suppress, merely harmlessly dissipated against our void shields, which shimmered with an almost contemptuous indifference. Their torpedoes, when they managed to get through, simply exploded against our ablative armor, barely scratching the surface. It was like spitting on a mountain. "Sir, Imperial fleet is scattering," Ensign Anya Sharma reported, her voice alight with adrenaline, her fingers flying across her console. "They're attempting evasive maneuvers, multiple FTL signatures detected, attempting escape vectors." "Too late for that," I said, leaning back in my command chair. "Initiate Exterminatus Light Protocol. No planetary bombardment yet, but I want every one of their ships atomized. I want them to know what unconditional surrender really means. And Commander Vance launched the Shadow Hounds. Let's give them something to truly fear. Our smaller, faster frigates, designated Vindicators and Hellfire class, began to dart through the Imperial formation, unleashing volleys of precision torpedoes that sought out weak points in their shields. Our destroyers, Nemesis and Avenger class, engaged in close-quarters brawling, their plasma batteries spitting blinding bolts of superheated energy that tore through the enemy ships with terrifying ease. Then came the Shadow Hounds. These weren't ships, they were advanced drone swarms, each no larger than a fighter but bristling with stealth fields and micro-torpedoes. They swarmed the larger Imperial vessels, bypassing shields with precision strikes, detonating munitions within critical systems. The sight was horrific for the Imperials, their proud warships being devoured from within by unseen enemies. On the bridge of the Imperious Vengeance, Admiral watched in dazed horror as his fleet was systematically dismantled. Ship after ship exploded, not in glorious fireballs, but in silent, violent implosions as their cores were breached and their structural integrity failed. The human ships moved with a terrifying grace, executing complex maneuvers that defied the known laws of space combat. They were not just fighting, they were dancing a ballet of destruction, a macabre performance choreographed to perfection. "This is impossible," Xyler shrieked, banging a fist on his console, blood dripping from one of his 4 eyes which had been exposed to a momentary energy surge. "Their technology, it's beyond anything recorded. How could they hide this?" "Sir, incoming. Massive kinetic impactor," Jaynara yelled, pointing at the main view screen, her own face pale with terror. A massive black projectile, wreathed in crackling energy, hurtled towards the Imperious Vengeance. It wasn't a torpedo. It was a pure kinetic slug, accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed. It impacted the ship's reinforced bow, and for a moment nothing happened. Then, the entire forward section of the Imperious Vengeance simply ceased to exist, cleanly shorn off as if by an invisible blade. Alarms blared, atmosphere vented, and the ship began to tumble end over end, a monument to shattered Imperial arrogance. "That'll be the Emperor's fist cannon," I mused, watching the debris field grow. "Nasty bit of kit. Always wondered how it'd work against a live target. Glad to see it's up to spec." "Admiral," Commander Vance reported, a triumphant smirk on her face. "Imperial fleet designated 98% neutralized. 2 transports attempting FTL jump, requesting permission to engage pursuit craft. They're trying to make a run for it, sir." "Permission granted," I said, a dark chuckle escaping my lips. "Don't let them get away. I want Xyler to have some very interesting stories to tell his Emperor, assuming he survives, of course, and send a courtesy message to the fleeing transports. You can run, but you can't hide from the Administratum's paperwork or our FTL inhibitors." 2 of our smaller, faster, Hunter-class destroyers, designed for rapid pursuit and interdiction, broke off, accelerating towards the fleeing transports at speeds that would have made an Imperial pilot's head explode. They quickly caught up, their pursuit lasers disabling the transport's FTL drives before they could escape the system. The Hunters then latched on with tractor beams, reeling in their prizes like fishermen hauling in a particularly stubborn catch. The battle was over almost as quickly as it began. The once proud Imperial fleet was now a collection of broken husks and scattered debris, drifting silently in the void around Earth. The only signs of their former might were the occasional flash of a dying reactor or the slow, agonizing spiral of a crippled hulk. "Well," I said, stretching contentedly in my chair, "that was a fun warm-up. Now for the diplomatic phase. Let's hope Emperor Xylos appreciates our unique brand of negotiation." President Thorne was already on the comms, a serene expression on her face, though her eyes sparkled with amusement. "Admiral Ravens, a truly spectacular display. My compliments to you and your fleet. I trust our message was received." Loud and clear, Madam President, I replied. I believe Admiral Zyler is currently experiencing what we humans refer to as a really bad day. We've managed to disable his command vessel and 2 troop transports. The rest of the fleet is creatively repurposed into space dust. We even managed to salvage some rather interesting Imperial tech from the wreckage. Might be useful for our cultural exchange program. Excellent, Thorne said. Prepare for boarding operations on the Imperious Vengeance. I want Zyler brought before me, and ensure his ship's black box recorder is secured. I believe the Emperor will find its contents illuminating, perhaps even educational. A few hours later, I stood on the bridge of the crippled Imperious Vengeance, surrounded by my boarding party. Imperial survivors, dazed and terrified, were being rounded up by our heavily armored security teams. These weren't the standard human soldiers. These were specialists, clad in sleek powered armor, their faces hidden behind visors that glowed with an internal blue light. They moved with a silent, efficient precision that further terrified the already traumatized Imperials. Zyler was found in his command chair, barely conscious, staring blankly at the ruined tactical display, muttering incoherently about false primitives and impossible weapons. His uniform was torn, and a trickle of green blood ran from one of his nostrils. "Admiral Zyler, I presume?" I asked, my voice calm but with an edge of steel. I knelt beside him, offering a small, prepackaged nutrient paste. "Here, you look like you could use this. Rough day, I know." He looked up, his 4 eyes wide with a mixture of fear and profound confusion. He flinched away from the paste. Who are you?" "I'm Admiral Luke Ravens," I replied, gesturing around the wrecked bridge. "And this is what happens when you decide to poke a sleeping bear, especially a bear that used to be a rather angry, homicidal bear a long, long time ago. We call it tough love." We escorted Zyler and his surviving officers back to Earth, not as prisoners but as guests, very disoriented, terrified guests. They were given luxurious quarters, the finest food carefully curated to avoid any allergic reactions, of course, and access to all the information about Earth they could possibly want. Information that directly contradicted everything their empire believed about primitive species. They saw our sprawling, verdant cities, powered by clean fusion energy, seamlessly integrated with nature. They saw our vibrant cultures, our art, our science, our technology that seamlessly integrated with daily life, making existence effortless and beautiful. They saw a humanity that had long since transcended the need for constant warfare, but had never forgotten how to fight or why. They witnessed holographic historical archives depicting our own dark ages, our wars, our struggles, our eventual triumph over self-destruction. They watched recordings of our early space colonization efforts, our first encounters with alien life, and our conscious decision to maintain a low profile in the wider galaxy. President Thorne met with Zyler personally. She sat across from him in a comfortable lounge, sipping tea from a delicate ceramic cup, while he fidgeted nervously, still reeling from the shock of his defeat and the bewildering hospitality. He kept glancing at the security guards, who stood silently by the door, their powered armor making them seem like living statues. "Admiral Zyler," Thorne began, her voice soft but firm, "I trust your stay has been educational." Zyler gulped, his chin folds trembling. "Madam President, I don't understand your capabilities. Why did you hide them? Why the deception?" "Because we preferred peace," Thorne explained, gesturing to the panoramic window that overlooked a bustling, futuristic cityscape. Flying cars glided silently between towering, plant-covered skyscrapers and parks stretched as far as the eye could see. "We prefer to explore, to create, to advance. We learned long ago that the pursuit of endless conquest ultimately leads to ruin. We saw your empire and we chose to observe, to protect ourselves, without interfering. We simply wish to be left alone." "But the message," Zyler stammered. "The Warhammer 40,000 library, was it all a lie, a fabrication?" Thorne smiled, a knowing, almost mischievous glint in her eyes. Not a lie, Admiral. A warning. A very, very expensive warning, it seems. Humanity has a long and complex history. We have experienced periods of great darkness, periods where we were those monsters, those conquerors, those destroyers. We learned from those times and we grew, but we never forget what we are capable of. It's a part of our collective memory, a dark echo of our past. We wanted you to understand the potential consequences of forcing our hand. We wanted you to see the depths we could sink to if provoked. Xyler was silent for a long moment, processing this information. The sheer hubris of his empire, of believing they could subjugate such a species, now weighed heavily on him. The irony was palpable. They had come to enslave primitives, only to discover they were themselves the primitives in the face of a vastly superior power that had chosen restraint. What happens now? He finally asked, his voice barely a whisper, defeat heavy in his tone. Now, Thorne said, her smile widening slightly, you go back to your emperor, and you tell him what you saw. You tell him that humanity is not to be trifled with. You tell him that if he insists on playing the role of galactic bully, he will find himself facing something far, far worse than he can possibly imagine. And you tell him that the next time there will be no exterminatus light. I was in the observation deck watching Earth spin beneath us, a beautiful blue marble against the inky blackness, when Xyler's ship, painstakingly repaired and fitted with advanced human sensor jammers and FTL drives, finally departed. It was a single, lonely speck against the vast canvas of space, now much faster and stealthier than before, a silent testament to human benevolence and technological prowess. Think you'll get the message? Commander Vance asked, standing beside me, a tablet in her hand showing a live feed of the Imperial ship's departure. I chuckled. Oh, he'll get the message all right. And I imagine the Emperor is going to have a very, very uncomfortable conversation with him. They wanted to conquer us. They wanted to enslave us. They just poked a hornet's nest with a very, very large and very, very angry hornets. And we just gave the hornet a fast ride home and a megaphone. So, Vance continued, a glint in her eye, does this mean we get to dust off the old man's toys? I always wanted to see a proper fleet action with full-spec void shields and cyclonic torpedoes in real combat, not just simulations. I winked. Maybe, Commander, maybe. We've shown them a glimpse of what we can be. Now let's see if they're smart enough to leave us alone. If not, well, then the galaxy is about to discover that the only thing worse than a sleeping giant is a giant that's just woken up and is very, very annoyed, and probably a little grumpy from its interrupted nap. And deep down, a part of me, a very old, very satisfied part, was humming the tune of The Emperor Protects. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity, when pushed, could be far more terrifying than any fictional horror. We were the guardians of our own peace, and if anyone dared to threaten it, they would find themselves facing the full, unbridled might of a species that remembered what it was like to be the monster and had chosen to be something better. But that didn't mean we'd forgotten how to be the monster, not by a long shot. The return of Admiral Xyler to the Imperial home world was not a triumphant one. His ship, despite its immaculate repairs and enhanced systems, felt like a ghost, an empty vessel carrying a broken man. The journey, usually a matter of weeks, had taken mere days, a testament to the human FTL upgrades. He was immediately brought before Emperor Xylos, a being whose presence commanded absolute deference, even from his most decorated admirals. Xylos was a creature of immense power, his intellect as sharp as any blade, and his patience as thin as a single strand of spun light. Admiral Xyler, Xylos boomed, his voice resonating through the vast audience chamber, a cavernous space filled with Imperial dignitaries and military leaders. You return alone. Your fleet is gone. Explain yourself. His multiple eyes, usually cold and calculating, now held a flicker of genuine irritation. Xyler, still visibly shaken, prostrated himself, his 4 eyes fixed on the floor. My Emperor, I failed. The primitives of Sol 3. They are not primitive, they are gods of war cloaked in peace. A ripple of murmuring went through the assembled Imperial court. Disbelief, anger, and a healthy dose of confusion spread through the ranks. Xylos merely narrowed his eyes, 4 pinpricks of light in the gloom, his patience wearing thin. Elaborate, Admiral. Speak plainly and choose your words with care. They possess technology beyond our comprehension, my Emperor, Xyler began, his voice gaining a desperate, frantic edge. Their ships emerged from nothing, vast engines of destruction. Our weapons, they were like sparks against their shields, which seemed to bend space itself. Their firepower vaporized our fleet in moments. I witnessed the imperious vengeance cleaved in half by a single projectile from a weapon they called the Emperor's Fist. He paused, swallowing hard, remembering the sheer, brutal efficiency of the human assault. He then recounted the story of the Warhammer 40,000 lore, the chilling message, and the even more chilling words of President Thorn and Admiral Ravens. He described the Earth he had seen, a paradise of advanced civilization, yet one guarded by an unseen, terrifying strength. He spoke of cities that touched the clouds, of clean energy, of art and science flourishing in harmony, yet all resting upon a foundation of power that could shatter worlds. Emperor Xylos listened in silence, his expression unreadable, his 6 limbs slowly flexing. When Xyler finished, the chamber was silent save for the heavy breathing of the Imperial guards and the occasional nervous cough from a lesser dignitary. "You suggest," Xylos finally said, his voice dangerously soft, a silken threat, "that these humans are a threat we cannot overcome, that your entire fleet was annihilated by a species that our censors deemed primitive." "My Emperor, they chose not to obliterate my ship or the 2 transports," Xyler pleaded, clutching at straws, desperate to convey the terrifying truth. "They repaired our vessel, enhanced its capabilities, and sent me back to deliver a warning. They wished for us to understand that their fiction was not so fictitious after all. They showed me their true home, a world of peace, yet guarded by an iron fist. They showed me historical archives of their own, where their species committed acts of war and conquest that would make our own campaigns seem like minor skirmishes." Xylos rose from his throne, his vast form casting a long shadow across the polished floor. He paced slowly, his 6 limbs moving with an eerie grace. The court held its breath, sensing the immense gravity of the situation. This was not just a failed conquest. This was a fundamental challenge to the Empire's galactic dominance. "You have been humbled, Admiral," Xylos declared, his voice a low rumble devoid of its usual booming authority. "You have witnessed a force unlike any the Empire has encountered, and they chose to let you live, to relay their message. This implies a strategic calculation, a demonstration of power rather than an act of pure annihilation." He stopped, turning his gaze back to the cowering Admiral. "Perhaps their fiction serves as a deterrent, a reminder of what they were and what they could be again should we provoke them further. They offered us a glimpse into their nightmares and asked if we wished to share them." He paused, then slammed one of his 6 fists onto the armrest of his throne, the sound echoing like thunder through the vast chamber. "This humanity, they have given us a choice, to respect their sovereignty or to face a war that would consume us all. And from your account, Admiral, it would be a war we would swiftly lose at an unimaginable cost." The weight of his words hung in the air. For the first time in centuries, the Galactic Empire faced a foe that instilled genuine fear, not just respect for power. The arrogance of centuries of unchallenged conquest had just been shattered by a single, terrifying encounter. Back on Earth, life returned to its accustomed rhythm, albeit with a new undercurrent of watchfulness and a renewed sense of pride. The incident with the Galactic Empire had served as a stark reminder that even in a galaxy thought peaceful, threats could emerge from the dark. But it had also shown the galaxy that humanity was not to be trifled with. I was back in my office, trying to figure out if an AI could truly appreciate the nuances of a good historical meme, specifically, one about a cat wearing a tiny general's hat, when President Thorn called. Admiral, she said, her voice cheerful, a clear sign that things had gone exactly to plan. I just received a very interesting communication from the Galactic Empire. It appears Admiral delivered our message, and his Emperor listened very intently. Oh, I leaned back, a satisfied smile playing on my lips. What's the verdict? Are they sending us a fruit basket or another invasion fleet? Neither, thankfully, Thorne replied, a chuckle in her voice. A formal apology, a complete withdrawal of their forces from our sector, and a surprisingly polite request for cultural exchange. They're particularly interested in our Warhammer 40,000 universe. Apparently, it's become quite the sensation on the Imperial home world. There's even talk of an Imperial historical society attempting to verify the existence of an Emperor of mankind. I burst out laughing, a genuine, hearty laugh that filled my office. You're telling me Emperor Xylos is now a 40k lore buff? That's brilliant. We've turned a potential galactic conqueror into a tabletop gaming enthusiast. Something to that effect, Thorne confirmed, amusement lacing her tone. They've even asked for an updated translation of the latest codexes, citing a desire for comprehensive understanding of potential future threats. And they're quite intrigued by the concept of exterminatus, albeit in a theoretical, thankfully not on us kind of way. I think we made our point rather emphatically, Admiral. Indeed we did, Madam President, I said, a sense of profound satisfaction washing over me. Indeed we did. Perhaps we should consider sending them a few of our historical strategy games next. Total War, Warhammer, perhaps, or maybe StarCraft, just to keep them on their toes and give them more nightmares. Thorne laughed again. A brilliant idea, Admiral. For now, however, let us simply enjoy the peace we have so effectively defended, and perhaps prepare for some very interesting diplomatic talks. We've shown them our teeth, now it's time to show them our hospitality. With a subtle reminder, of course, that those teeth are still very much there, and we're not afraid to use them if needed. Perhaps a few more cultural exchange packages could include some of our more robust scientific documentaries about advanced weaponry. Always, Madam President, I replied, saluting. Always. The galactic neighborhood just got a whole lot more interesting and a whole lot more respectful. As I disconnected the call, I looked out the window of my office at the bustling, peaceful city below. Humanity had faced its first real galactic challenge in centuries, and we had responded not with blind aggression, but with a calculated, terrifying display of what we once were and what we could still be. We had reminded the galaxy that while we sought peace, we were not to be mistaken for weak. We were humanity. We had walked through fire, forged empires, and descended into darkness. But we had also risen, learned, and evolved. And if anyone forgot that, we had plenty of copies of the Imperial infantryman's uplifting primer to remind them, and a fleet of warships that could make even the most hardened galactic conqueror question their life choices, and a terrifyingly extensive library of fictional horrors that could make them think twice before sending another invasion fleet. The galaxy was a vast and mysterious place, but one thing was now abundantly clear. Earth was no longer a primitive world to be conquered. It was a beacon, a warning, and perhaps, one day, a friend. But only on our terms. And always, always with the unshakable knowledge that if push came to shove, we could and would go full Warhammer 40k on anyone who dared to threaten our home. And I, Fleet Admiral Luke Ravens, would be there, grinning all the way, probably still trying to teach my AI how to appreciate the finer points of a particularly obscure historical meme.
Hey guys, thank you for watching the video. So remember, don't be like the Emperor, well, the Galactic Emperor, I should say, because you might just get a life lesson there. And anyhow, this was a really good one. I liked it. I like to make it really. Like that was really interesting. Anyhow, so if you guys liked it, like I said in the beginning, like, share, and subscribe. And remember the saying: the Emperor protects. Have a good one.